Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, and today we're doing something a little bit different. I got a request from a friend who has an Airbnb where they wanted a custom sign for their property. And so I went ahead and raided the stash of wood. He had actually asked if I had something as cedar, as their house is planked with that. So I happened to have some and needed to pick out some boards. So I'm looking for areas that are going to be a little more cleaner, that don't have a lot of knots and imperfections in them, as we are going to be putting in engraving. So I want some more of that clear, smooth grain. Just kind of going through, looking at which ones might have a good color matching, as well as some clear areas, and we'll put the others back. Once we have those, as you can see, these are fairly smooth on 3 of the edges. They've been machined, but on the 4th edge, it still has a bit of a rough cut. So we're going to be doing a little processing of this material. Now, even though it does have a clean edge on one side, I'm going to use that to make an initial cut on the opposite side. What I'm going for is just wanting a fresh, clean 90-degree cut on both sides. So I'm going to run it through the table saw both sides. And now I am actually going to start processing this down into shorter lengths. We're getting it closer to our dimensions, but I'm going to leave it a little long. So I'm just using the cordless circular saw to rough cut these down to size. Then I take it over to my table saw with a crosscut sled and I'm just going to trim up these pieces. Now I'm still keeping them a little bit long, as I'm going to be continuing to process this down, and then we will trim it to final shape before we engrave it. But I'm just going to rip through all of these boards, getting nice clean edges, getting them all roughly the same length. With them all cut to size, I can now kind of get an orientation of what's going to work well. I'm going to use the clear boards in the center, making sure that the text or whatnot comes through, and double checking that we're going to be fitting the anticipated size of the sign. Last check for any knots or imperfections, and we can send it to the planer. Now, even though these were S4S from the mill, I'm just giving them a nice clean edge, making sure that they're all at the exact same thickness, as these did come out of a couple separate boards. So a planer like this makes this easy, but if you get quality material from a mill, you might not need to do that. At this point, I can double check that the fit is nice and tight. You see that the lines almost disappear, and they're all roughly the same thickness. Now I could just glue these together, but since this is going to be an outdoor sign, I'm going to add some biscuits, and those will help me do 2 things. They will help keep the alignment as close together, and also add just a little bit of a strength. So this just plunges a little oval type shape into the edge of the board, and I drew those lines as reference points so I can get them in the same spots. So just go through and add these to every single board, both sides on the middle ones, and get ready for the glue. Speaking of glue, this was going to be outside. I needed some fresh Type on 3, so headed off to the store to grab that. And then we can come back, get it ready in the clamps. I'm using a little wax paper just to protect the clamps from the squeeze out that's going to happen with these. So flip them all up on end, and we'll start applying that glue. These are the biscuits, the little oval shapes, almost football shapes there. Those are going to go in those slots and just help align things and hold them together. Now I'm using the Type on 3, and then I'm using a silicone glue brush from Rockler. This just helps make sure that we get a consistent coverage on all the spots, and that we're going to have just a little bit of squeeze out and ensure glue gets on all the seams. At this point, we can use the clamps to start squeezing those together. With those biscuits, sometimes it creates a little bit of extra pressure. I'm going to put a clamp on top to act as kind of cawls, make sure this lays flat. Add a couple on the ends, just making sure everything even squeeze out along the entire seams. So we let that dry overnight, make sure it's nice and cured up, and then it's time to start removing the excess glue, as you do have a little bit of squeeze out and need to clean up those seams. Now, I happen to have a drum sander. This is a 16-inch wide one, so what I'm doing is I'm feeding it through, and this has about 100 grit sandpaper on there. And then once that side's done, we just rotate it around and get the other side. This whole thing keeps it nice and flat. Do that a few times and make sure we get it done on both sides so we have a nice flat board. Then I'm just going to bring it back to the random orbit sander, and I'll work up to a little bit higher. I like to get it to at least a 240 when I'm doing laser engraving. At this point, we can bring it back to the crosscut sled. We're going to just trim this to our final dimensions. I'm just giving myself one nice clean edge on that side, and then I will rip it down to about 22 inches wide and then we needed this to be about 18 inches tall. So let's take a quick look at the file in Lighburn that we're going to be putting on the first sign. And they sent me an Adobe Illustrator file, which worked well, as Lighburn can import those. However, I'm going to point out one thing that came up that we didn't notice till later is you'll notice the welcome to is in a different color. That actually didn't import properly the first time. And so when you see the video footage of the engraving, this is going to be missing up here. And so I ended up having to come back and add it. It was great. I sent the picture to the customer and they said, hey, it looks great, but we're missing the welcome to. And then was able to put it back in and add that in. So that's why that's in a separate layer. But I wanted to just show a few things of how I set up this file. Now, the item, I don't have the X40 Max in an enclosure yet, and so I didn't have a good way to set up an alignment jig or anything. So I created a box outline of the cedar plank and was able to just lightly etch that onto my assembly table. It's just light plywood, it'll sand right out. So I used that first box as basically a framing and alignment tool. And then to cut down the speed of the file, I broke all these up and made sure that each of these items were grouped individually. So you'll see the various sections of words, this logo, as well as these bars are grouped separately. And for the logo and the words, I just went ahead and set it up. Fill groups together was one of the important things, so that creates less jumping around. It'll make sure that the laser takes each of these sections and will do all these words together rather than doing one at a time. That helps speed things up. Did go ahead and just leave it at 0.85 line interval for this with this 40 watt beam that has just a slight overlap in the beam. And then I had done a speed test on the material, made sure that we were getting a deepish engrave and a dark engrave, and that turned out to be 17.5 thousand millimeters per minute and 100% power. We did do just a normal fill on these. I do not have flood fill on, so it's just going to go back and forth, bottom to top on those. Now, if I included that on these lines, it would be going back and forth and just beep, 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 and it takes a while. So I separated this into a separate layer, used the same settings, 17,500 and 100% power, but I went ahead and set up this as an offset fill here instead of just a regular fill, and that's going to go basically from the inside out, and it's going to follow this pattern around basically in a big circle, just stepping it in and out each time. That cut down the time greatly. If I would have done this as a standard fill, it would have added about an hour to this engrave. As is, all of these items were just a little bit over an hour to do on here. So overall size of the engraving ended up coming in at about just under 17 inches by 14 inches high. So we're really using a lot of the height of the laser. Definitely had some more width to it. And that's one of the reasons I opted for the X40 Max, is I have that extra width on this, but more importantly on the next one we're going to engrave. So let's drop this over to the laser and watch the burn. So now that the burn is complete, you see we do have a little bit of residue left from the engrave. So we're going to want to go ahead and take that off. So I go ahead and add some 320 grit sandpaper to my random orbit sander and just lightly run over that. This will have minimal effect on the engraving, but just kind of work to polish off that extra residue. So after that's done, I'll go ahead and take the air compressor and just blow out all of the engraving areas, get any of that remaining sawdust cleaned out. so that it does not affect the look when you apply finish. So here we are done, except for we forgot that welcome to, so we'll get that taken care of later. Now on to the slab. As I mentioned, we had talked about the area that he wanted the sign to be made out of. So I'm just kind of taking a look here, making sure that it's looking good, measuring it out to make sure we have enough space there. And then I'll go ahead and mark my lines for where I need to make the cuts. Now I'm placing this 1/2 inch foam down as a backer for where I can cut the slab. I'm going to place that on top there, and of course, as luck would have it, I forgot to hit record, but go ahead and take that cut piece of slab, and again, I'm just finishing it up to about 240 grit before we send it to the laser. So similar to the last one, I broke this up into a couple layers, and I'm going to show you here we have our estimated time at 1 hour and 13 minutes, and I'll just kind of zip through this. You see I have them grouped again. We have their logo, and then the various words kind of being done in groups, top to bottom, so it's not jumping around too much. And then we're doing that offset fill going from the inside to the outside on that border. Right, now we can group everything together, make it one group, and come in and make sure that instead of fill groups together, we have everything fill all shapes at once. Let's see what that has in effect. Takes it to 1 hour 43. So that would be a little bit faster than the individual groups. So the things you want to check on a file like this to ensure that you're maximizing your time. When you have clusters of this, you want to make sure that you have this set fill groups together and group these in logical. Now you could group all of this together. I just broke them up into the 3 because it will help limit that white space travel. Anytime you have chunks of white groups here where it's not going to be engraving, you want to try to avoid having it transfer over that. It'll help improve your speed. Then you also want to double check in your optimization that you have order by group added, and in your layer you want to have fill groups together. So then when you have the border like this, you want to make sure you're using the offset fill. Have it on a separate layer so that it will do it separately from the rest. And that will, once again, instead of having all this white space in between going back and forth, it will just be constantly burning in that loop. So that is how we were able to cut down our times all the way to 1 hour and 13 from, we were about almost almost 3 hours if we did all these kind of individual and allowed that border to be engraved typically. So that's how I set it up. Again, we're using the X40 Max. So this has the we have the 31 inch wide working area. So our engraving here being 22 inches wide was definitely bigger than most of my other lasers. So this is working out well for this sign in one go. So let's go ahead and send this off to the laser. So hopefully you enjoyed this. This one is the glued up panel out of the planks of red cedar, and then this one back here, of course, was the slab. Now, nice thing, he was able to be in town and we took a look at the slab. We were able to find the exact part of it he wanted to use, and then he is actually going to take these back and finish them himself. Otherwise, that would have been a whole other step that I would need to do. Now, if you're looking at this for businesses and such, you know, being able to do customized signs, that is an area where there's not necessarily a lot of people out there, and a way you can maybe charge up a little bit more. But anytime I do that, want to make sure they are happy with it and give them an incentive to do more. And so I'm going to be throwing in this set of customized coasters. I've talked about these on the channel before. You buy these coasters in bulk, they're super cheap. You pay, you know, you can get these for less than $1 a piece. I did a video on this caddy. Again, the material into this and the time into this is minimal. Standalone, I would probably charge $20 for the set of coasters, and then you know, another 15 to 20 for the caddy. So, you know, while this is maybe a $40 add-on, I like to give it to businesses that I'm doing larger things like this for free, just as kind of a thank you. I can kind of do it on the side while I'm working on the other stuff. So it's things like adding in just little extras on a larger order like this, maybe a more expensive order, that just really helps solidify some of those business-to-business relationships, and will be something that they may have sitting in their office, or in this case, it's going to be sitting in their Airbnb. People are going to see it, and if they have questions, hopefully we'll be getting referrals back. So hopefully this was interesting to everyone. Wanted to show a couple different ways of making bigger signs. Not everyone has access to these large slabs, so being able to glue up panels, you can definitely find material in you know, big box stores, Home Depot, Lowe's, here Menards, have different kinds of hardwoods that are in planks, and they're usually what's considered S4S, or finished on 4 sides, that with some minor work at table saw, and you don't even need to use the biscuits. You could join them. You need some clamps. Anyway, don't be afraid to try to make some of your own materials using some mild tools, and be able to open up maybe some new streams of revenue for you if you're doing this for a business, or be able to play with things for friends and family if you're just doing this as a hobby. So anyway, that's out for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you back soon. But most importantly, I hope you can get out into your workshop and make something too. We'll catch you next time.